muy buenas tardes a todos y bienvenidos a
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third session of this virtual outsource to LAC week 2020. We offer global digital services companies in Latin America and the Caribbean a chance to connect with other companies and to learn about technologies and innovation. Now we will talk about logistical solutions to a pandemic that interrupts supply chains of essential goods. We have some panelists with us, Alfonso de los Rios, co-founder of Nowports, and the CEO of Avancargo, Sergio Pachón, and Martin Zenik from the GA Group and Business Decision Platforms Global, as well as Jaime Granados from the IDB. You can share your questions in the chat. Welcome to all the panelists. Go ahead, please. Thank you, Manuela. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with this brilliant panel, people who are so prominent in the logistics sectors. And as Manuela said a moment ago, we will talk about logistical services and how to preserve our chains of essential goods during a pandemic. We know we've had very difficult times that we've been through in terms of health, in terms of well-being of citizens, in terms of economics. And much of our task and our challenge has been related to logistics and providing essential goods to deal with a pandemic of this magnitude. Medicine, medical products, food, essential parts. All these finished products must get to their destination quickly, and the efficiency and effectiveness of that delivery is what we are trying to achieve when we're going through such difficult times all over the world. So logistics has had to come up with a response, and of the type that we need at this time. We need to have efficient, quick logistics, digital logistics if possible, that can overcome the high prices that often affect us in the first mile, the last mile, or somewhere in between. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome once again, Alfonso de los Rios, Sergio Pachón, Diego Bertezzolo, and also our colleague, Martin Zenik. We will talk to them about these challenges in a moment. But first of all, I'd like to very briefly introduce some of their companies. And this is they're in random order, has nothing to do with the order that they will be speaking in. Alfonso de los Rios is a co-founder of the company Nowports. He is currently the CEO, and he's responsible for the strategic direction of this company. He has studied technology and entrepreneurship. The company was founded in 2018 by Alfonso and Maximiliano Casal, and they're one of the main digital cargo agents in Latin America. And thanks to their technology, they generate routes, and they use AI to calculate rates. They have digitalized reports that they offer, and they communicate with everybody involved. They have over 90 employees. They have offices in Mexico, Chile, and Bolivia. And this year, operations will start in Peru and Brazil. So welcome, Alfonso. Before we start with you, Alfonso, we'll tell you a bit about Sergio Pachón, CEO of Kiwibots, also a very interesting prototype under Kiwi Campos, and they have package delivery founded in 2016 by Felipe Chavez and Sergio Pachón and other partners. They started in Berkeley in a business incubator, and they've been expanding throughout several cities in California. They've also experimented with drones. It would be interesting to talk about that at some point. And this company saw how costly it was, how expensive it was to deliver a pizza. Sometimes a delivery cost more than the pizza itself. So that's how they got started. Then we have Diego Bertesolo, CEO of Avancargo. It is a platform that's digitizing cargo shipment, and various organizations have invested in them, and their objective is to consolidate the growth of this app with the support of the most prominent companies in the logistics sector, and they seek to end that asymmetry that exists in the sector, where everybody's used to using paper and pencil, and data is not digitized. So they operate mainly in Latin America, and more specifically in Argentina. We also have the ASA group. We have Martin Senik representing them today. Senik, he's the global head. He is an expert in digital transformations, often invited as a speaker to international events, and he specializes in supply chain innovations, but also life sciences. He's an expert in that too, so he has a lot to share with us. He's been guiding and leading large companies in their journey towards digitalization. So now we can get started. Let's take a look at some of the questions we have for you, gentlemen. And I'd like to start with the questions we have for Diego. Health problems, Diego, and travel restrictions have meant big challenges in the world of shipment and transportation, and there's been an increase in demand for last mile delivery. So what changes have you seen here? What are the technological ways that you've faced this new challenge? Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you for the invitation. Unfortunately, we are in a space within logistics that's been severely affected by the pandemic in general in the world, and in particular in Latin America. Unlike the last mile delivery, as you mentioned, where there's been a boom in the last few months in long distance transportation, especially in terms of industry and industrial airplanes, volume has dropped by 20-30%. In Argentina, there has been a 70% drop in certain sectors. So the situation is looking quite dire right now. And for us in particular, it's not going so badly. We are using technology, and the simplest way to talk about this is to say that this long distance shipment operates the way it was operating 50 years ago, mainly a lot of paper and pencil, as you mentioned, with use of tools that have been available for a long time, the possibility of oversight in real time when it comes to units and drivers without need for paper documents, digital confirmation of trips. And this has benefited us as a company and has also offered new tools to our clients. And we've done well in a context that unfortunately is still unfolding and we have not yet recovered from. I'm sorry, I was saying that yes, in fact, this has been a very traumatic problem for the vast greatest number of companies in the region, but there are some that can take advantage of these opportunities. And those who have digital tools that they already use are the ones better positioned to do well, and they can provide a service, a social service, not just an economic service that is very essential. So we're happy to hear that you have been active, you've been operating, and you've been thriving in general, even through this process. We'll go back to Diego in a moment. Martin, I'd like to ask you a question. related to the fact that your company G8 makes other companies, empowers other companies to digitize and to go digital. So how has this crisis affected Latin America? And can you give us examples of how technology and data have helped these companies adapt to this new reality? Go ahead, Martin. Thank you, Jaime. Good afternoon, everyone. When faced with disruptive events like what we're facing now, there's panic and there are barriers. Logistics really go through a lot of changes, and we ask ourselves how many providers, how many suppliers will close, how will I replace them, where will the next demand peak be, do I have enough to satisfy this demand? And we need to have a supply chain, and we need to have the technology to be able to deliver. Transparency is essential. But technology in and of itself is not enough. We need to be able to predict what might happen if certain variables were to come up, so we can know what we're going to do ahead of time. We have a platform for decision making through AI. We feel that supply chains can be managed digitally. All the transactions and all the parts of it are consolidated, and this provides transparency. And it also shows us what is happening in real time. And we can anticipate future behaviors. We can anticipate supply peaks, etc. The interpreter apologizes. The audio is very poor. Also, there are companies with critical supply chains, and with our platform, we can help them understand what is happening at all the time, and we can accelerate the processes that they need to apply to adapt. And what about data collection? Where do you get the information and from data from transactions? Do you have them in databases acquired from the market, or do you capture them somehow? How does that process work? Well, we have 27 years working with process and management systems, so we have a lot of knowledge about how data is managed. And one of the benefits of our platform is that we have a combination of new technologies with all that previous knowledge from different industries that we have accumulated. So it's easy to understand how we can capture the data from transactions and how we can use that to form better systems. So we see here the best of two worlds between your novel capabilities that you offer to a company, together with that long tradition and experience that means that you have deep knowledge of the business. So it's a winning combination. Alfonso, I'd like to ask you a question. Medical equipment delivery at the scale that's necessary now has been a challenge all over the world. What creative solutions have you seen in Latin America, and how has Now Ports contributed to this? Yes, thank you for the invitation. We know that COVID has had a huge impact on delivery of medical equipment, masks, oxygen tanks, everything in between, respirators, ventilators. So profit margins were cut down. Of course, we gave this type of cargo priority in our offices in Latin America. We decided to prioritize all this essential clinical material. And of course, this changed our Latin American ecosystem a bit. So small and medium-sized enterprises that were importing masks already for hospitals or other venues, even for construction, there was a 400% increase in imports, mainly from Asia. And this meant that demand for air transport from Asia to Latin America went up, and there was a lot of congestion of this cargo. So those small and medium-sized companies that import these materials increased their imports by about 400%. Now it's going back, it's coming back down a little bit. Perhaps at that time an excess of masks was imported, but it's better to bring in more than is necessary. That's better than running out. So that's what we've seen in the last few months. Alfonso, did you have to deal with situations where authorities captured that the cargo instead of letting it continue on its journey? Yes, one problem we faced is that just as the small and medium-sized enterprises were importing more, companies that had never imported this all of a sudden started importing masks and other things as well. So customs offices in Latin America, even in the US, were trying to avoid an imbalance in the market, making perhaps causing them to be sold at too high a price. So when somebody wanted to move masks from one point to another, we decided to do a background check and see if they hadn't been doing it before, that they have all the necessary permits. So we went through this whole procedure before shipping so that we wouldn't have this problem in transshipment points. Thank you. We'll come back with more questions, but now we'll talk to Sergio. Nobody would have been able to predict the sudden increase in demand for robotic deliveries. How has this helped with the new health and logistics challenges? Well, thank you for the invitation, first of all. What's happening now is that we're dealing with a new normality, let's say, with the robots. We've always thought that eventually in the future, that last mile delivery logistics at low prices, at low cost would happen thanks to robots. But it had been difficult to present our solution. Governments didn't seem to be very interested. There was a barrier to entry. If you look at our robot is small, it's very user-friendly, it doesn't cause negative feelings among the community. Could you explain what you are referring to with people don't want to share their space perhaps with other things, for example, bike racks or sidewalks. So if it's a very big robot, it would be difficult for people to accept having that robot taking up space in their community. So we have a small robot. And this also means that people don't see this robot as a challenge or as something that's going to be clogging up their sidewalks. And basically what we're offering is a very inexpensive service, as you said. In developed countries, in the US, for example, a developed country with the biggest numbers for e-commerce in the world, we can't offer on-demand costs at a very on-demand delivery at a very low cost. It's very difficult for companies to deliver within an hour, for example. But now companies and clients and customers are digitizing very quickly, and this is forcing companies to offer their services and products online and with very short delivery times. And so we also saw the need to start using apps ourselves. And in the US, Australia, places where we're trying to use these technologies, getting all the way to someone's house is very expensive. You can't offer $1 or $2 because the delivery person makes $20 an hour perhaps, and they can do 1 or 2 home deliveries in an hour. So who pays for this? The restaurant or the company or the customer? So what we've tried to offer is a product that makes it possible to democratize this home delivery so that people, regardless of their purchasing power, can access this type of service. And this hasn't happened because of what I was saying before, how costly it can be. So our biggest challenge now is that we don't have enough robots to cover demand. So we're talking to about 25 companies right now that want to acquire these robots, and then this would make it worthwhile to make the robots. It's not the same to make just a few as it is to make 1,000 of them. So this scaling up will be allowing us to deploy the robots in different places at the same time. And when we get to a city, initially we talk to the mayor's office first because we know that we need to work with them directly in order to successfully offer our product. As I said, to make sure that the robots aren't seen as a problem by the city, but rather as something that's going to help them and offer a service that's good for the community. And Sergio, do you have an example of a city where you think there's been a very good experience in the deployment of these robots, and why? Well, we've deployed them in Berkeley, mainly, in Denver, and Los Angeles, and we're doing it in Taipei now. I think in Berkeley was an interesting experiment. It's a city in the US, but it's a city where there's an anti-technology movement. There are the so-called hippies who are against this type of solution. In Berkeley, actually, there are technologies that we are not allowed to use. So we did get the permission for our robots, however, and we had been working with the community from the beginning, asking them how they perceive the robots, what negatives, potential negatives that they see. But if you go to Berkeley now, you'll see that the robots are part of the community, part of the university, and people take care of them. Berkeley is a city with a lot of homeless people, and you'll find these people taking care of the robots, making sure they're not vandalized. They know these robots are providing a service, and ultimately they are helping the city, giving people more free time, helping companies be able to offer more services. So it's a solution that is helpful, and it satisfies a need that wasn't being satisfied in other ways. Yes, thank you, Sergio. We'll come back to you soon. I'd like to go back to Diego for a few minutes. I'd like to ask you, Diego, services in the logistics sector in Latin America, how has it changed? The pandemic has been accelerating digitalization. Is the pandemic just accelerating a change that was going to happen anyway, or is it going to be just temporary? Will it remain? How do you see it? Well, we feel that this acceleration and the changes that come with it are here to stay. And in long-haul transportation, as I was saying, this sector lags behind, really, compared to delivery services in large cities. And in these last 2 to 3 months, a lot has changed, a lot of progress has been made, where processes were relatively simple, technologically speaking, but it was the mindset wasn't there to adopt these changes before. We need to be able to make a distinction between what we do with infrastructure, algorithms, the logic behind the platform and how it's used. We don't need a user for that, or rather, you don't need users to contribute too much there, but there are other processes where we need people to, we need buy-in from people, and we've seen that lately, leaving pen and paper behind, the carriers forced to do it by this new circumstance. They've had to and been willing to accept some changes using certain functions in an application. It used to be very difficult to convince them to do it, but now things are changing much more quickly. And I think that these changes are here to stay. And that's perhaps the only positive side that we see to these last few months. And this digitalization process in transportation might help the government to not just you private providers of logistics services, but and the buyer of the goods are helped as well, but perhaps also the government will benefit where you have this more streamlined transportation, and this can be systematized with responses for investments, and for perhaps solving certain social difficulties that the government might want to solve. Are there any tensions between the government in terms of the use of this information, or no? No, not at all, just the contrary. I agree with your observation. I think it's positive for the government. I'll tell you our experience. We've collaborated and worked with the Ministry of Transportation in Argentina, and it's important to highlight this because the long-haul transportation service in Latin America in general, I mean, in the world in general, and in Latin America in particular, it's very fragmented. A company might have only 3 trucks, a carrier. In Argentina has 700,000 trucks and 80,000 businesses. So these are mainly small and medium-sized companies. They are those who work on their own, they freelance. Very difficult to coordinate, but they function as one. So platforms such as ours, our objective, of course, is to improve coordination and how this whole sector operates based on information and data. But as you said, this is not just related to trade, all this data or supply and demand, but also optimization, public policy, improving conditions for all players involved. There's a lot that can be done with this new level of coordination. And here in Latin America, we are just beginning and setting off along that road. We'll come back with more questions, but for now, I'd like to talk to Martin once more. Tell us a little bit more about GA Labs, especially the AI decision-making one. What can Latin America gain from the use of AI and decision-making based on data and evidence, and what challenges do we face here? And looking into the future, what is your vision for AI and how it will be used in Latin America and the Caribbean? Go ahead, please. Well, this lab was created to develop a platform for decision-making based on evidence. And we have an ecosystem where we have technological partners, but we also have partners from academia, from the business sector. And the goal of this lab is to solve challenges and to help our clients with insights. So we offer them solutions to solve their specific problems. So we try to get our clients to accelerate their adoption of these technologies. And they need to have the data science skills for this in a short time. And how do we do this? We need to understand their problem deeply, and then we work on it always with the support of our external teams and disruptive technologies. We have scouting offices in Israel, for example, and we can still draw a lot of value from data in Latin America. We have raw data, but in and of themselves, they have no value. We have to know how to use them. And our proposal from our lab, we have a few, but we help companies get the data, improve the quality of the data, and know how to use the data. And internal processes need to be integrated with external elements, as we said before. So we need to understand which variables and factors are relevant for each company we work with. Then with all that, we can make necessary corrections and make better decisions as well. That was very interesting, Martin. A question just out of curiosity. When you find data scientists, do you find them in Latin America with the skills that you need? Do you think there's enough supply, or do we need to create it or improve the supply of data scientists in Latin America such that we can take care of our needs within our own region? And sometimes we need institutions to be able to bring this talent to where the need is. How do you see it?
I agree. There's a lot of potential in Latin America, and people who really know data science. And what we do, however, is bring in more, make sure more people are trained to do it. This is a part of our lab as well. If we export and we provide services from Latin America to other countries, what we want is for Latin America to be a hunting ground for talent. So there's a lot of talent out there, and we're expanding this so that more people can be involved. Great, Martin. Now I'd like to go to Alfonso. Alfonso, we're also very interested in your vision when it comes to this issue, the role of new technologies such as automation, AI, which we've been discussing, when it comes to managing supply shocks and uncertainty during crises such as the pandemic. Sure, which appear to be more frequent. This is our situation today. There might be issues due to climate change in the future or a deepening of the economic crisis. So it would seem that we might have generalized uncertainty. How would these new technologies help us resolve social problems that are going to be increasingly frequent? Right, I completely agree. I think that we see this through there are different factors that can explain what the current situation is and challenges. The logistical industry has been the same for 70 years. Today, it's almost impossible to imagine how we would have been able to deal with this pandemic from home without the right technological tools we need. Digital document processing, for example, among other things. So we're looking to January when we started to see the effects of COVID due to our providers in Asia. What we need now is not just artificial intelligence. We need access to data in real time so that we can include this in models so that we can then adapt to this information when there's an abrupt change in supply and in the global market. There's a defined model for AI that worked fine under normal circumstances when it came to the supply chain, but if there's an 80% drop in supply, but demand of 800% for air freight, this creates a system, if it's an old system, and when I mean old, I'm talking about 2 or 3 months old, it's no longer useful. So this is what we see. We focus on data, access to data in real time. We link up with airlines, but also with purchase orders for all of our clients on the continent, so that when purchase orders were being issued, then volume was measured in different areas. So that was the first thing we did. And the second thing, which was very important, was automating documents. We're currently automating a large amount of them, and I'm sure that we're not the only ones who realized the way we dealt with documents was extremely important. Printing them was no longer an option since we were now working at home, so we created an e-timing document module so that we were all on the same page, talking about the same thing on a single platform. So I would summarize this by saying that it is clear that we absolutely need real-time information from customs on estimates from airlines, and we need transit times and arrival times. When was it supposed to come? And that is not happening due to changes worldwide. And managing documents from home overnight, our logistics partners were asking, hey, where did you put this document? Where is this invoice? And so we had to deal with these problems, which create delays, and there's an economic impact on the supply chain for our customers. Right, Alfonso, I would just like to tell you and our participants that at the IDB, we are also making a significant effort to reduce logistical costs for business operators all over Latin America and in the Caribbean. In some countries, we are more involved than in others. In Central America, for example, we are modernizing land border crossings, and we are deploying a digital Central American business platform, which is a boost for operability, which will allow all export transactions, imports, and transit transactions will be done digitally on a single platform. Export documents then will be uploaded one time. This will work for transit and for importing, and this will all be held in a single platform that will create lower dispatch times, storing times, the nationalization of shipments, which have a negative impact on the final price to consumers. So we need to work with systems. We need to change our operational mindset so that everyone uploads information to a digital platform before shipment is sent, so that it then doesn't come to the port, the airport, or the border. So you don't have to start from scratch there and start managing the transaction at those points. That is essentially what we're looking to do. I have a question for Sergio as well. When we look at the new normal after the crisis, what is your view of the role of robotics and automation and logistics in Latin America and the Caribbean in the immediate future? And could you tell us talk to us about any of your experiences? That would be very interesting. Sergio, go ahead. Sure, Jaime. I think there are two important things that are happening right now in Latin America. And when we talk about our goals and bringing in robots, I think in the short term, when it comes to a cost-benefit analysis, this is not a solution that's really relevant right now in Latin America. Right now, it's just easier and cheaper to do it with people than with robots. Now, why did we bring in our robots? For one thing, our design team, our engineering team, is in Medellin, so it's important for them to see what's going on with the robot day to day, what day-to-day operations are, everything that comes up, problems that arise, so that they can take a look at everything that goes on in a day with that robot. And it's also very important to us that in Latin America, it's seen that we are developing cutting-edge technology. That's very important to us as well. I think that in Latin American countries, we face large-scale economic changes. So we need to deal with machine learning, AI, engineering, and development on a much greater level. Otherwise, other countries will have a bigger advantage on us. So it's important for us to deploy our technology here, that people know that this is cutting-edge technology. We have done we've had the most interactions between people and robots, or conducted the most deliveries overall. So, and we want people to know that this was developed in Colombia and Latin America. So I think that's the main task that we've taken on when it comes to our robots. In the short term, I don't really see that we'll be able to change how deliveries to people are handled. In the longer term, maybe in 5 or 10 years, I think our robots and robots and technology will be much more cost effective. We'll be able to bring the cost of using a robot down very low, and deliveries will compete directly with what's happening right now here in Latin America. So I'd say that we shouldn't wait too long to go digital so that other countries don't have an advantage. I think when we're talking about Latin America, Colombia, mainly Colombia, we've focused greatly on fossil fuels and commodities, and that, I think, will be expensive for us at the long run. I think in our countries, starting in governments and with entrepreneurs, we need to start to promote this kind of knowledge, these kinds of technologies, so that people realize that we can do this here, even though we are at a disadvantage when it comes to our economy and our access to technology in and of itself, but that we can compete globally. I think that's our responsibility. We need to do that as Colombians, as Latin Americans, and as business people. We need to develop these things and do things that truly do change the world, not just at the local level, but we can do things that change the world. Great, Sergio. Thank you very much. I think that we all agree with that. There are great aspirations out there, and if we're all doing what we can to improve the economic and social welfare for our people. Robotics definitely play an important role in that regard. Now, we have an important series of very specific questions. Some of them are specific and are specific to some of you. And I'd like to read those out loud so that our audience feels a part of the discussion. From Argentina, Alejandro Alonso from IT Sitio asks, GA, are these technologies for gathering data and applying predictive intelligence in transportation and logistics available? Thank you. And definitely, that's one area that we're focused on the most. As I said early on, we work on the supply chain, critical inputs for medicine or medical devices, and we developed connectors and programs to extract data. There are some that are more common, but some are specific to different areas, and we're using algorithms to do the things that Alejandro has mentioned to help with logistics and transportation. Now, these algorithms, of course, are not 100% usable for all companies, but we can start with some of them. So I'll go back to the first thing we talked about. We all have a lot of experience working with large companies with many of the best known systems. And if we combine all this to predictive models and are able to extract data, it will speed up the implementation of data science, and it will make it much faster. Thank you, Martin. Let's see, there are several questions, but I'd like to ask a few myself. Your experience with drones, how prepared are we for this? We discussed robots with Sergio. We discussed data science and artificial intelligence when it comes to traditional logistics. But how do we feel when it comes to providing delivery services via drone? We'd need to invest in logistics, public infrastructure. Would that be the case? Or is it rather a regulatory issue? Or is it a matter of the public accepting it and feeling safe with it? What is the issue? Who would like to take a stab at this one? Jaime, I think that when it comes to drones, we've looked at them from the beginning as an option. I think the biggest problem with drones is that when it comes to security, robots, since the way they're developed, they can't go faster than a person can. So the worst accident that could happen would be for a robot to hit you in the leg, and we haven't had any serious accidents. I think that if a drone fails and it falls on someone, I think that then that could be very serious and possibly even fatal. I think that's the biggest issue I see when it comes to drones. And batteries, I think there are still a lot of issues when it comes to batteries, drones carrying heavy objects, for example. And if we look at it in terms of regulation or oversight, I'm not sure that people would feel comfortable for drones to record or to record images, and I think that issue is sensitive as well. But I do think that in the future, it might be possible for drones to do these things, but there's still a lot of things that we need to look at and think about before deploying this on a larger scale. Sure, Sergio, since I have you online, the robots you're making, are they open source? And if not, have you considered making them open source? What are the pros and cons of making this code open or not in order to deploy robots in Latin America? We've thought about it, and I think it's important to open up technology so that anyone can develop it based on what we've already done. I think that we've always been open to doing it that way. Obviously, right now we're applying for patents and the like, so I think that this hasn't been developed on a larger scale yet. I think there's a lot of work to do still, so we need to keep working on it, because I think there are many businesses that will start based on this idea of what's happening in accelerated digitalization. So I do think that we need to make the most of our current experience. We have 3 years on other companies that may have more money or more resources to tackle this problem. But obviously, I think that in the future, we are very aware of the fact that we need to open up technology so that a lot of other things can be developed using what we've done as a foundation. What have your discussions been like with larger companies, with platforms that are much more developed, for example, especially that produce goods and that make up a large part of international trade? Have you done business with them, with Amazon, for example, with Mercado Libre, with large product suppliers online? It wasn't up until this year that we started working with B2B. Previously, the idea we had in mind was B2C. We had our own app, and this was the first thing we tried to do, the entire process, and then we realized last year that that would be very difficult. It would be very difficult to get users, keep them, and so using our own e-commerce app. In the past, we've conducted pilot projects with DoorDash, and what we did was we completely changed the model and we started searching to work together with large companies that already have the demand, and we would supply the robot and logistics surrounding that robot. So as I said, we're working with about 25 companies, including Domino's, Uber Eats, Rappi, Sodexo, and we're going to start pilot projects. I think the second half of the year we'll start doing this. They were a bit delayed due to the pandemic. We talked to Facebook about offering robots on campus. So I think we have a lot of work to do coming up, because we've seen that the model works, that we can have successful partnerships with these companies. But I think it's quite probable. We've made over 100,000 deliveries. The robot works, and I think it'll be very cool to work directly with businesses now. And that will bring about new challenges as well when it comes to technology, how to adapt to their technologies and their platforms. But I think that we're working with Rappi right now, and then we'll work with Sodexo on campuses in the US. So we're very happy about that. And we are very excited about deploying these robots in different places, scaling up our operations, which is something that we have to do. We've done it in 2 or 3 places, but we need to do it in 10, 20 more places. And that means challenges there when it comes to producing robots, logistics, the functioning of robots, maintenance. So these are very exciting challenges we see in our near future. Thank you very much, Sergio. Thank you. I'd like to talk a bit about partnerships, public-private partnerships, and what room there is for these in Latin America. For example, working with you, Diego Martin Alfonso, would anyone like to take that question? The role of PPPs in your area and what this means for Latin America? Go right ahead. Well, I don't know if crucial is the word. I don't know if it's crucial, but it is very important because of what we discussed just a few minutes ago. We talked about the effort to go digital and adoption. It's a huge effort, and we think that it is vital then to work with large-scale providers and with providers that can speed up processes. That's been part of our strategy from day one, even when it comes to our investors. We've not always sought to link up with people who could be potential users, but also accelerators in our field operations. Go right ahead, yes. I think there are two things here. One, like we said before, in our AI lab, we work very closely as well with others to add value to what we do. That's one thing. And even right now, during the pandemic, we think our technology can be very helpful to the government or other national agencies to confront the pandemic, talk about the processes where we can improve operations in the supply chain. So we're also offering our technology in that regard so that outcomes are successful or positive in the public sector as well. We want to make the most of the ecosystem we have in order to share what we have. Thank you very much, Martin. I'd like to ask Alfonso a question. Alfonso, we saw that e-commerce overall has been on the rise. It's been growing exponentially over the last few years, and now with the pandemic, even more so. In Latin America, e-commerce is still domestic. It hasn't gone international, at least based on the data we have. We see evidence that compared to regular transactions, international transactions in Latin America on electronic platforms are still quite small. So what do you think the reason for this is, and what can states do in order to use more e-commerce internationally? Right, completely true. That's a very good question. A wholesale trade, for example, it's hard to do internationally, and the main reason is because customs or rules for imports and exports are quite complex when we're talking retail. Now, what we're trying to do is guide companies, so to speak, or guide consumers who are purchasing a product so that they know how things can be imported to certain countries, what the rules of that country are, and especially tariffs, because it's very costly if you're doing retail, and there will be taxes levied on that product. Thank you, Alfonso. One last question, because we're going to have to close this panel. Let's see who takes this question. It has to do with data privacy. As you work with data, privacy will always be an issue on the table, and we know that globally there are different attitudes when it comes to managing data. There are more permissive mentalities and more restrictive ones, and some that are middle of the road. Thinking perhaps about the regulatory approach of the EU that allows transactions for data and a data flow, but it's controlled due to the privacy of that data. So what would you recommend to Latin American policy makers? An open data attitude or a more cautious attitude in order to safeguard the privacy of personal data, which a lot of people would like to keep private? So any of the four of you can take that question. Sure, I can get us started with that answer. we deal more with enterprises who make shipments. We're not working directly with consumers, and open data are key for us. But you need to strike a balance. That is, information is key, or it's open, but the owner of that information should not be open, because that could put them in a difficult position when it comes to volume, addresses, the value of the merchandise they're exporting. So our goal is to protect that data, to use that data, but to offer that data through open data platforms to providers, as long as there are very set limits as far as what can and cannot be shared. Perfect. Would anyone else like to add to that? I just have one additional comment. I agree completely. You need to strike a balance, because obviously a lot of data are private and shouldn't be shared, but we want to make the most of large volumes of data in order to include them in databases and make decisions based on that data. So we've worked with data scientists. We know regulations in place when it comes to using that data, but we do it very carefully. The interpreter apologizes, the audio was inaudible. Great, I think that brings us to the end of our panel. This has been an extremely interesting exchange over the last hour. I'd like to thank Diego, Martín, Alfonso, and Sergio for your kindness and generosity with your time. Thank you for helping us inform these important decisions on logistics and the use of technology in logistics, which is extremely relevant in this day and age. And I agree with you completely that yes, this is here to stay. COVID sped up a series of changes that have come to stay, and these changes are for good in such a complex situation that we are currently experiencing. Thank you for your time. I wish you and your families the best on the professional, personal, and health level. And thank you to our audience for being with us. Manuela, thank you as well. Thank you, Jaime. Thank you for your closing words. To all our panelists, thank you very much for your insights. You all know that on our event platform, you can find a recording of this session. It was so interesting that I'm sure a few of you will like to watch it again. So with that, I invite you to come with us to the next event where we will discuss e-commerce. It's a live session, and it will be a discussion between Luis Alberto Moreno, the president of the IDB, a conversation with Marcos Galperin, the founder of Mercado Libre. So the link is on the event website. Please come with us, and we'll see you in just a few minutes. Thank you all very much, and goodbye.